What's going on, guys? Stefan here with you, S&E's Garage. Behind us we have our mechanically totaled Mazda 6, and then also behind us we have a new heart for it. Alright guys, so I know in our last video we left off at a point where we said we were going to do some exploratory surgery on this thing, do some tests and figure out exactly what is going on. But after the research I've done on this particular engine and a couple of other things that have come to light, I don't think it's worth us wasting any time picking around in here, because ultimately this thing got really hot and it's going to be a lost cause. I had originally thought that some of these engines use like a sandwich plate oil cooler for the oil, by the oil filter housing. I had thought maybe that was how the coolant was mixing with the oil in the radiator, but did some research, found out that these do not have one of them. So literally the only thing it could be is a head gasket issue or a cracked cylinder head. And I did find a couple of TSBs saying that these cylinder heads are known for cracking, especially after overheating. So we're gonna go ahead and give this engine the sign of the cross. It's done, it's coming out. And with that said, behind us we have our replacement engine, and I want to talk to you about it. Now, whenever I put an engine in something, I always like to stay at the same mileage or less. I don't want to swap a higher mileage engine into this car and hurt its value or reliability for either myself or the next buyer of this car when we decide to sell it. So what we have here is the engine out of a 2014 Mazda CX-5 with exactly 119,000 miles on it. You'll see here, there is the VIN that this came out of right there. It is a 2014, and like we said, it has 119,000 miles on it. I'm gonna drop some pictures of this car that this engine came out of in the video right here. And you'll see that it was a very light hit. That car, for all intents and purposes, could easily have been fixed, but it was probably totaled out by the insurance company just due to the age of the car and the fact that the parts are worth more than the car at this point. We ended up paying right around $1,900 for this engine. That's $1,900. And what we're going to go ahead and do today is we're going to freshen it up basically. For some reason, I don't know, I guess this is common, they chop the harness. So in order to get this old harness off, the intake manifold has to come off because the direct injectors are behind it and I can't get to them. So this intake manifold is going to come off to get the rest of this harness out. And like we said, this is a direct injected engine, so we are going to go ahead and use some CRC intake valve and turbo cleaner to clean that intake tract. I'm sure it's dirty. And then after we do all that, we're just going to go ahead and run a leak down test. We're going to check all 4 cylinders. We want to make sure that this engine internally is sealing correctly and is going to be a good candidate for this car. And if everything there turns out good, we're going to go ahead and treat it to some nice new laser iridium spark plugs. Now, I find it funny that this engine came out of a CX-5, which is basically a crossover SUV. I believe it's the smallest one at the time that they offered, and it is literally a direct drop-in into this Mazda 6. That just goes to show you with corporate engineering, they can make one power plant work in every single one of their cars, which is totally it's great for them because it saves them a bunch of money on R&D or research and development. So you're also going to see here that they went ahead and cut every single hose off of this thing. So we're going to have to remove these old hoses. I already removed a couple of the stupid little nipples. And then what looks to me like the oil pressure switch is broken. So we are going to have to swap that over from the old engine onto this new one. And then also over here, before I forget to show you, there is like an adapter plate, like a spacer for the transmission that is also damaged. If this Mazda 6 has one of them, that's going to have to be swapped over to the new engine as well, along with this oil pan that looks to me like it was damaged during shipping or when they pulled it. Looking at the collision that this car was in, I do not believe that that happened because of that collision. I think it was, the casualty of pulling the engine in such a hasteful manner. Kind of barbaric if you ask me, but it is what it is. So let's get you on the tripod. I'm not gonna bore you here. Let's put you in a time lapse. We're gonna go ahead, like I said, pull this intake manifold and see what we got going on underneath it.
Just like the street lights lit this town, like a fire in a blaze, gotta burn it down. Can't be afraid to leave this out. We got this far, don't know how. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna light it up tonight. We gonna light it up tonight. We gonna light it up just like the sunrise. We gonna light it up now.
All right, guys, so we went ahead, intake manifold is off and most of the old harness is off. You'll see down here we have just a couple little wires here. It looks like we have a knock sensor here, and then we have our fuel injector connectors that we're going to go ahead and remove. But other than that, I wanted to grab a flashlight here. For a direct injected engine, this is not nearly as bad as I had expected. Yeah, there's some gunk and some grime in there, but it looks to me like Mazda uses some sort of a air oil separator here to try to keep that down to a minimum, and it appears that what they're doing is working pretty well. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put you back on the time lapse. We're just going to, disconnect the rest of these connectors here for the fuel injectors and whatever else we got going on here. I'm going to throw this out. Don't need it. I'm not sure which intake manifold I'm going to run yet, whether we use the one that's on the car or the one that this engine came with. I'm going to talk to one of my buddies who's a master Mazda tech. He might actually make a cameo in this video. Not entirely sure yet. But one thing I wanted to show you that I forgot to show you earlier is I looked up the maintenance history on this car this engine that this car came out of before we bought it. And I just want to show you what we're looking at here. This engine's got 118,000 miles on it, and it looks like if I were to pull this valve cover off, I could eat off of it. So we bought a very good engine for this car, and I think that this was our best case scenario here because we have a known good engine. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. This was in a running car, and this one obviously is hurt. So back on the time lapse, injectors off, knock sensor harness off, and then we're going to blow these holes out. I'm going to rotate the engine around, get all the gunk out of there, and we'll do some cleaning. Alright guys, so what you just saw us do was basically we blew out any dust or dirt that could have fallen in there when we went ahead and removed the intake manifold. There was a couple of little pieces of dirt that got down in there. We just wanted to blow it out. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our CRC intake valve cleaner here, and we are going to spray this into every runner that has a closed set of valves. So right now, number 2 is closed, number 1 is closed, and number 4 is closed. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to soak this stuff. We're going to let it sit for a little while, and then we're going to come back out here with an old toothbrush is what I'm going to use. It's a pretty straight shot, and I'm just going to clean this out the best I can. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to cut a bunch of zip ties, and we're going to use the zip tie method with a drill. And we're just going to stick the drill down there with the zip ties, run it in and out, clean all this stuff out. And every once in a while, I'm going to take my blowgun. I'm going to cover up the runners with a rag, and I'm just going to blow it out, get the crud out of there, and then we're going to basically repeat. So again, time lapse. I'll do one of these live with you to kind of show you what the deal is, how to do it, and then I'll time lapse the rest. So ironically enough, I grabbed one of my kids' old toothbrushes. They just got new ones in their stockings for Christmas, and this one vibrates. So we're gonna go ahead in there with this vibrating pokey brush here, and we're just gonna scrub the heck out of these runners. I'm going to try to get the tops of the valves as best I can here. We're not seeking perfection here. We want to clean this up a little bit so that the engine runs that much better once we get it in the car. And this will possibly get us some better leak down numbers once we do our leak down test. Maybe this will help the valves seat a little bit better. But just take a look at how cruddy this toothbrush looks here. Okay, just gonna keep doing this. I don't think I need to bore you with me doing this whole thing. We're just gonna, you know, agitate the rest of these that I have sprayed down, and then we'll get back with you when we have the zip ties set up. For those of you that have never heard of the zip tie method that I just mentioned, you basically cut a bunch of zip ties, you stick them in your drill, you tighten up your chuck, and you stick the zip ties in there, and you just kind of let it have some fun in there. And the theory is that the zip ties will get in there behind the valve, you know, into all the nooks and crannies, and really kind of blow that stuff out of there. Every once in a while, you just want to pull out, inspect your zip ties, make sure you're not missing any pieces down there. But these are plastic, and this is minimally invasive because you're not using any type of metal brushes that's going to damage the aluminum of the, you know, the runner or the, you know, the valve seat or anything like that. Okay, let's go ahead, cover this up. Blow it out. Safe to say we just made a little bit of a mess here. But now, going to again spray this out with some clean cleaner. And give it another quick run here with the zip ties. I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner. I have this Mighty Vac that I use to bleed brakes. Now, for the purpose of what we are trying to do here, again, we are not at all seeking perfection. We just want to clean those valves up a little bit. And if you take a look down in there and then compare it to one that we haven't sprayed yet, like this one where you can see all of that soot and gunk on the top of the valve, there we go. That looks 1,000 times better. So again, I'm going to time lapse it. We're going to do all 8 of these runners, and then we'll be back with you.
Just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna light it up tonight. We gonna light it up, babe. Tonight we gonna light it up just like the sunrise. We gonna light it up.
So now that we've made a complete mess of the engine, ourself, and the floor, let's just go ahead and take a look at our work here. So you'll see these valves are much, much cleaner than they were. They're still not perfect. I'm not looking for perfect. I just want this thing to run nice. So that should help. So now let's get you back on the tripod. We're gonna pull these ignition coils off. We're gonna pull the spark plugs, and we're gonna check leak down just to make sure the inside of this engine is nice and healthy. So these coils are held in with 8mm nuts, or bolts rather. Just gonna pull them out, like so. Okay, and we're just gonna set them aside. Now let's go ahead and remove our spark plugs. Now, if everything is on the up and up with this engine, like I said, we are going to be giving it a treat with some nice fresh spark plugs. But before I do that, I do, like I said, want to check leak down just to ensure that we have nothing going on as far as engine health. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the right size spark plug socket for this because it uses some really small spark plugs. So I'm just using a 14mm socket here, and I'm going to go down there with a magnet and pull the plugs out. These definitely look original to me, but they also look to be very healthy, meaning the engine is burning healthy, which is a plus. Yeah, they're original. It still says Mazda there right on it. Okay, let's get our leak down tester set up, and we're going to show you just how to do that. So to go ahead and check leak down, like you saw us do, you're going to remove all of your spark plugs, and then you're going to drop an extension or something long down into the cylinder. Now to check leak down, you need to be at top dead center. So we're going to rotate this engine here until number 1 is sticking straight up. And right here is our dwell point where you'll see it's not rising or falling as we rotate. So number 1 is now at top dead center. For all intents and purposes, all of our valves on cylinder number 1 should now be closed. So we're going to go ahead and thread in our cylinder leakage tester. We're going to connect it here to shop air. And we're going to set the gauges to roughly where they need to be. Now let's go ahead. All right, guys, so what you're gonna see here is we got our leak down tester set on number 1. We have this set at 100 PSI, and we have about 95 PSI holding in the combustion chamber. Now you do hear a slight amount of hissing here coming out of the intake valves, and I do see some little bubbles. There's probably some carbon still in there, but after running the engine, that should clear up. So number 1 is looking good for us. I'm not too worried about that. Let's go ahead and check out number 2. Okay guys, here we are on number 2. There is virtually no leak down coming out of this. I don't hear anything hissing out of the intake or the exhaust, so number 2 is super healthy. Let's go ahead and move over to number 3. All right guys, we got like a 4% leak down on number 3. Again, a little bit of hissing out of the intake valves. Not worried about that whatsoever. Again, as this engine runs, that carbon that's left on the seat will burn off and or be, crushed to the point that it's not going to matter. So we got one more to check. Let's check number 4 and hope we're good. Number 4 has also got 0% leak down. I don't hear any notable hissing, and everything's good here. So now that we know she's happy and healthy and will live another day, we're going to treat her to some nice, fresh spark plugs. So I'm just going to start them with this magnet, because again, I don't have the right size spark plug socket for this engine. Last thing you want to do is drop the plug down into the head, because you can close the gap on the plug, and then you'll be sitting there wondering why your engine's not running right with new plugs in it, and it's because you crushed the ground electrode when you installed it. So, and we are starting these by hand, and we are not going to murder them. We're just gonna snug them down. Now all I'm doing here is crushing or bottoming out, I should say, the crush washer to provide a very good combustion seal. And we're done. All right, guys, so that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. This 2014 CX-5 engine is in beautiful health. It's got nice clean valves now, nice clean intake tract, and I think this engine is going to suit us super well here in our Mazda 6. So if you like this video, you like what we're doing here, please like, share, and subscribe. Please stay tuned. Our next video on this car will be slinging the engine. We're going to drop it out the bottom. We're going to drop this new one in, and hopefully we'll have a runner. See you on the next one.